The wind moved like fire over the red desert, carrying dust across broken stones. Far beyond the last oasis, a small alien village lived in silence, waiting for rain that never came. They had learned to survive on little water and less hope. Until one day, something fell from the sky, cutting through the clouds like a silver wound. When the noise ended, the villagers saw smoke rising near the dunes. Children ran first, chasing the trail, their small feet sinking in hot sand. At the center of a deep crater lay a strange metal shape, half buried and steaming. Inside, a creature in a torn suit moved weakly, trying to breathe. The aliens had never seen a being like him. His skin was pale, his eyes closed, and his body looked fragile under strange armor. Some thought he was a ghost. Others whispered that he was a weapon of the old gods. Fear spread quickly, and the chief shouted for everyone to stay away. But one old alien woman, named Rema, stepped forward slowly. Her hands shook as she held a small bowl of water, the last she had saved that day. She looked at the dying creature and said softly, "If he is alive, he is hungry." Then she poured a few drops on his lips, and his fingers moved. The human opened his eyes for a moment, blue like the edge of the sky. He tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. Rema called 2 young villagers to help, and together they pulled him from the wreck. His leg was bleeding, his chest armor cracked, yet he still tried to stand. They carried him to the village, hiding him inside Rema's tent. Many argued outside, saying this was madness, that the Empire would punish them if they found out. But Rema said, "He fell from the stars, not from the Empire. He needs help." The chief looked at her for a long time, then turned away, letting her do what she wished. Night fell, cold and heavy. The human woke up, confused, pain burning through his body. He looked around, seeing alien faces watching from shadows. He whispered one word, "Thank you," and closed his eyes again. For days he drifted between life and death. Rema gave him water drop by drop, fed him with grain broth. The children peeked through the tent flap, whispering stories about the Starman who came from fire. When he finally sat up, the entire village gathered to see him. He spoke slowly, learning their words one by one. He pointed to himself and said, "Human." They did not understand at first, but they repeated it softly. "Human." The sound strange and gentle in their throats. Soon he began helping with simple tasks, fixing broken tools with pieces from his wrecked suit. He showed them how to heat stones to make clean water, how to dig deeper wells. Rema watched him with quiet pride, saying he was more child than soldier. But the elders still feared what his presence might bring. At night, he sat outside the tent, looking at the stars. The villagers noticed how he touched a small metal piece he carried in his hand. It blinked with a weak blue light, like a heartbeat. One child asked what it was, and he smiled. "A call home." The next morning, scouts reported strange sounds beyond the dunes. Metal shapes moving in the distance, shining under the sun. The chief grew worried, thinking the Empire's patrol had found them. But the human looked calm and said, "No, they are searching for me." When evening came, the desert sky burned red. The human stood beside Rema and said softly, "If they come, do not fear." She frowned, not understanding, but his eyes looked kind. He glanced at the blinking device and whispered, "They will come soon." That night, while the village slept, he sat alone. The wind carried sand over his boots, and the stars above shimmered like tears. He thought of his home, of earth, of oceans and forests he might never see again. But when he looked at the quiet village that had saved him, he smiled. Kindness, he said to himself, still lives among the stars. And far away, beyond the black sea of space, a faint signal reached a distant receiver. On a blue planet called Earth, a light blinked on a console. A lost human had been found. The morning after the signal, the desert air felt strange, heavy with waiting. The villagers worked in silence, pretending not to look at the tent where the human rested. Rema brought him food, simple grain cakes and boiled roots, but he barely ate. His eyes were distant, always scanning the horizon as if listening for something far away. He spent hours repairing small devices from the broken wreck. Tiny lights blinked, soft hums filled the tent, and the children gathered like curious birds. He showed them how to connect wires, how light could pass through crystal and make power. To them it was magic, to him it was survival. One evening, a child asked, "Starman, Will your people come? The human smiled gently. If they hear me, yes. Another whispered, will they hurt us? He shook his head. They will not harm those who gave kindness. As days passed, his strength returned. He walked again through the village, touching the dry soil with his hands. He asked about their crops, their water, their way of living. Rema told him about the dying rivers, about how the rains had stopped generations ago. The human listened quietly, and something changed in his face, a soft sadness mixed with promise. At night, he climbed the dunes and looked at the stars. The villagers thought he prayed to them, but he was counting constellations. Each pattern was a memory, each light a direction. He whispered coordinates under his breath, knowing his signal needed time to travel. He was lost, but not forgotten. Weeks passed, and the human became part of the village. He helped build stronger shelters, taught them how to purify sand into glass. He crafted tools from metal debris, shaping them with calm precision. When a storm hit the village, he guided everyone into the caves, protecting the young first. They began to trust him, even the chief who once feared him. One night, during a sandstorm, the beacon came alive. It pulsed brighter than before, the tent filled with blue light. The human stared at it in silence, his heart pounding. Then he smiled for the first time since he arrived, whispering, "They found me." Rema entered, frightened by the glow. "What is it doing?" she asked. "It is answering," he said softly. "It is my world calling back." The beacon emitted a low hum, then a soft voice, too faint for her to understand. Tears filled his eyes, a mixture of joy and sorrow. The next day, the human stood at the edge of the dunes. He looked toward the horizon, where sky met sand in endless gold. He knew what would follow: ships, machines, and power beyond imagination. He also knew the villagers might fear what was coming. So he began to prepare them. He gathered the children and taught them how to plant seeds deep in cool soil. He told them about forests, oceans, and rivers that never ran dry. He promised that one day their world would breathe again. The villagers listened, half believing, half afraid. At night, Rema asked, "When they come, what will happen to us?" He looked at her, his voice soft but certain. "They will thank you." She frowned. "We only gave food and water." He smiled. "Sometimes, that is more powerful than armies." Far above, unseen by anyone below, a long-range Terran probe received the human's message. It carried his coordinates across light years, through silent black space. On Earth, deep within the orbital command array, a signal burst across the network. "Survivor located, planetary distress zone, humanitarian response required." The message spread fast. Humanity had always remembered those who saved one of their own. Across the colonies, engineers, scientists, and commanders began to prepare, not for war, but for a gift. Meanwhile, the human continued to teach the villagers. He laughed more often, even as his eyes searched the skies every evening. When children asked about his home, he spoke of green fields, deep oceans, and rain that sang. They closed their eyes and tried to imagine it. They could not, but they wanted to believe. One night, he stood under the stars and whispered to himself, "Hold on, they are coming." The beacon blinked one last time before going dark. The connection was made, and now there was only waiting. In the heart of the desert, the human sat beside the dying fire. He held Rema's hand gently, his voice soft. "You saved me when I was alone in the stars," he said. "Soon, my people will repay what you have given, and they never forget." The wind moved across the dunes again. The stars above shimmered brighter than ever. Far away, engines awakened in the void, and the path to this forgotten world began to glow. The night before the skies changed, the air felt too quiet. Even the wind had stopped whispering across the dunes. Rema sat outside her tent, watching the human as he worked beside a small fire. He was silent, focused, his fingers moving over the metal beacon like a craftsman fixing a sacred relic. Tiny sparks glimmered as he adjusted the circuits. The children watched in awe, their faces glowing in the blue light. One asked softly, "Starman, what happens when they come?" He paused, looking at them with tired but kind eyes. "They will see your kindness," he said, "and they will not forget it." The beacon hummed, stronger than before, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. For weeks, he had tuned its frequency, rebuilding pieces from the wreckage. Now it reached farther than ever, beyond the clouds, through the endless black between stars. The signal carried one message, coordinates, identity, and a single word, safe. He sat back, breathing slowly. The beacon's glow reflected in his eyes like twin moons. Rema placed a hand on his shoulder. Is it done? He nodded. It is done. Now all we can do is wait. The villagers didn't sleep that night. From the dunes they saw the faint blue light rising into the sky. Some thought it was a ghost calling others of its kind. Others felt a strange warmth, as if hope itself had taken shape. Far beyond their understanding, the signal crossed light years. It slipped through dust clouds, bypassed dead satellites and old war stations, until it reached a silent receiver orbiting a small blue planet. Earth's listening array came alive, alarms flashing, voices shouting. Signal confirmed. Human distress code identified. Deep under the surface of Luna Command, officers gathered around the display. ID matches Commander Elias Wren, missing from the Ares frontier 2 years ago. Location, a general asked. Unregistered system, outer spiral arm, near the Xylar expanse. The room fell quiet. Then one word was spoken. Prepare the humanitarian fleet. Back on the desert world, days turned into weeks again. The human grew restless, pacing near the beacon each morning. He knew light traveled slow, that help would take time. Yet his heart ached with the kind of hope that refused to die. The villagers tried to cheer him, bringing fruits, water, and music. He smiled, helping them mend roofs and repair wells. But every night, he looked at the stars, whispering softly, "Come on, just hear me." One evening, he gathered the children and drew shapes in the sand. He showed them the outline of his homeworld, oceans, forests, and bright cities under clouds. "Your world can look like this too," he said. "The land remembers how to live." They laughed, not understanding, but the dream took root in their hearts. Rema often sat beside him as he spoke about Earth. "How can one world have so much water?" she asked. He chuckled. "Because we learned long ago that life is the greatest weapon." She smiled at that. "Then maybe your people will use it again." At dawn one day, the ground trembled softly. A strange sound filled the air, low, distant, and powerful. The villagers ran outside, fear and wonder mixing in their eyes. The human looked to the sky, shading his face from the rising light. High above the clouds, something glimmered, a point of silver moving fast. It wasn't like any ship they had ever seen. It moved with grace, silent and deliberate, leaving trails of soft blue fire. The human exhaled slowly, his voice trembling. "They found me." The craft vanished beyond the horizon, but its echo lingered in the air. That night, the human worked beside the beacon again. He sent a short-coded pulse, marking the planet's location and safety zone. He then whispered to Rema, "Soon, your people will see what humanity brings." Rema looked at him with both fear and wonder. "Are they like you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "No," he said. "They are far better." For the next few nights, the stars seemed brighter. The villagers began to dream again, children talking about green fields and rain. The human felt something deep inside, pride, gratitude, and a strange peace. He knew Earth had heard him, and when Earth answered, the universe would change. He stood alone at the edge of the desert. The sand shimmered like gold under twin moons. He raised his hand toward the stars and whispered, "For every act of kindness, there will be a garden in return." And somewhere across the void, engines ignited, fleets stirred from silence. Humanity had begun its journey, not for conquest, but for gratitude. The message had reached the stars, and the stars were coming home. Dawn came slow and heavy, painted in gold and red across the endless desert. The villagers woke to a strange vibration under their feet, a deep hum like the heartbeat of the world itself. At first, they thought it was another storm, but the sky was clear, blue and trembling. Then the sound grew louder, filling the air until the dunes began to shake. Rema stepped out of her tent, clutching her shawl as the wind swirled around her. She looked up and froze, her mouth falling open. Above the clouds, something vast was descending, a shadow that stretched from horizon to horizon. It wasn't just one ship, it was hundreds, each glowing with white light and moving in perfect silence. The villagers ran into the open sands, shouting in awe and fear. Children pointed at the sky, their small hands shaking. Even the chief fell to his knees, whispering prayers to the stars. The human walked calmly through the chaos, his eyes fixed upward. "They're here," he said softly, almost to himself. As the first ship broke through the atmosphere, the air rippled like water. Blue light scattered across the desert, and the wreckage of his old vessel began to hum in reply. The ships did not fire, did not threaten. Instead, they opened their bays and released shimmering pods. Each pod descended slowly, glowing like falling stars. When they touched the ground, the sand turned green beneath them. The villagers gasped, watching as grass began to spread from every point of impact. Machines unfolded like flowers, thin arms reaching into the soil. They sprayed mist into the air, and the scent of rain filled the wind. The human knelt and pressed his hand against the new grass, tears forming in his eyes. "Home brought life," he whispered, "not war." Rema walked to him, her voice trembling. "You said they would thank us, but this is more than thanks." He smiled through his tears. "It's what humanity does best." All across the desert, water burst from old cracks, forming shallow streams that glittered in sunlight. Villagers dipped their hands into the clear flow, crying out with laughter. The world that had forgotten rain was alive again. In the sky, drones hovered, scanning the terrain, planting seeds, releasing tiny drones that built irrigation channels. Everywhere the pods landed, life followed: vines, moss, and fruit-bearing trees. The villagers watched in disbelief as barren land turned to color before their eyes. Children danced through the new grass, leaving trails of footprints behind them. That night, the first artificial rain fell. Clouds formed above the desert, dark and heavy, releasing drops that shone in the moonlight. The villagers stood outside their tents, faces lifted, mouths open to taste water from the sky. The human stood beside Rema and whispered, "This is humanity's answer." In orbit, the fleet's commander sent a message to the surface. "This planet is under Earth's protection," she said, her voice calm and strong. "By order of the Terran Council, all aid operations are to continue until the ecosystem stabilizes." To the villagers, it sounded like music from heaven. Down below, engineers in exosuits landed among the dunes. They approached the village, bowed slightly, and greeted Rema with respect. "We're here because of what you did," one of them said. "You fed one of ours." Rema didn't understand every word, but she smiled anyway, holding the human's hand. For the first time in generations, fire was no longer the brightest thing in the desert. Life was. Trees spread their roots deep into the ground, flowers opened, and streams carved paths through the sand. The human walked among his rescuers, still wearing his torn armor. He pointed toward the village and said, "They saved me. Make sure they never go hungry again." And humanity listened. Massive terraforming stations descended, releasing waves of microflora and oxygenators. Within days, the air grew cooler, the wind softer, the color of the world shifting from gold to green. The villagers began building stone homes near the rivers that now flowed endlessly. The desert was no longer a grave, it was a garden. When night came again, the stars shone brighter than ever. The human stood at the edge of the new forest, feeling the wet soil beneath his boots. Rema joined him quietly, her voice soft. "Your people are powerful." He smiled. "No, Rema, they're grateful." In the sky above them, Earth's ships hovered like silent guardians. Their lights reflected in the water that now stretched across the valley. The human closed his eyes, breathing the scent of rain and life. He whispered, "They fed a lost human, so Earth made their world bloom forever." And the wind carried his words through the green valley, across rivers that hadn't existed the day before, into forests that whispered humanity's promise. That kindness, once given, would always return 1,000-fold. Days passed like dreams, golden and green. The once silent desert now sang with rivers, birds, and the whisper of leaves. The villagers could hardly believe it. Their world, once dry, cracked, and cruel, was alive again. And at the center of it all stood the human, smiling as the dawn broke over the new horizon. Earth's engineers worked day and night, machines humming softly like living creatures. Massive drones sowed forests from the air, scattering seeds that glowed blue under the sun. Wherever the light touched, plants sprang up, stretching toward the sky with hungry joy. The barren dunes turned into meadows, and the meadows grew into jungles. The villagers watched as rivers deepened and fish appeared as if from old memory. Children chased glowing insects that had been released from the pods, laughing in wonder. Rema walked among the tall grass, her hands brushing petals she had never seen before. Tears filled her eyes. "It's like a dream," she whispered, and the human nodded. "It's home." At the edge of the village, engineers built great towers of silver and glass. They drew clean energy from the twin suns, powering irrigation systems that never stopped. From orbit, the fleet dropped nutrient clouds into the atmosphere. The air thickened with moisture, and for the first time in centuries, the world had a heartbeat. Every evening, the human would walk through the growing fields with Rema. He showed her how to plant new crops and explained how Earth's soil worked. She listened carefully, trying to remember every word. "Why do your people do this?" she asked one night. "We only gave you food." The human smiled softly. "And we only returned what you gave, life." Soon, the aliens' villages began to change. They learned from Earth's engineers, building stone houses and greenhouses filled with crops. They named the first harvest the human gift. Each year after, they would celebrate the day the sky rained light. But not all watched with joy. Across the stars, the Galactic Empire's scouts recorded the event from afar. They could not understand why the humans had come. There was no profit, no conquest. Their reports said simply, "Earth restores a dead world, no military activity detected." And the Emperor frowned, whispering, "Humans waste power on compassion." Yet across the universe, others whispered differently. Merchants, wanderers, and scholars spoke of the miracle world. They called it Illyria, the world reborn by human gratitude. Some said it was proof that humanity carried both the sword and the seed. On the surface, the transformation continued. Animals once thought extinct were brought from genetic archives. Forests grew so fast that even the engineers marveled. The rivers split into 7 branches, each named after the stars and the human's old command insignia. One morning, the human woke to find the first fruit trees heavy with color. He plucked a small orange fruit and handed it to Rema. She bit into it and laughed, tears running down her cheeks. "It tastes like sunlight," she said, and he smiled. "It tastes like home." The children played among the roots, weaving flowers into their hair. The villagers learned songs from the humans, their voices blending under the new moon. The engineers built schools, teaching them to read Earth's common tongue. And the human who had once fallen from the sky became their bridge to the stars. At sunset, the fleet commander visited the village. She bowed to Rema and said, "The Terran Council has declared this planet a sanctuary. No empire may claim it. No weapon may touch it. It belongs to those who offered kindness." Rema bowed in return, her voice breaking. "Then we are forever in your debt." But the commander shook her head. "No, we are in yours." When she left, the villagers gathered around the human and sang. Their voices echoed through the green valley, rising toward the ships above. And that night, as fireflies drifted over the river, the human looked up at the stars, wondering who else might be watching. He knew word would spread, and not every power would welcome it. But he also knew that no empire could destroy what was born of kindness. For kindness was not weakness. It was humanity's oldest strength. And in the heart of the new world, where grass met starlight, he whispered to the wind, "They fed one of us, so we fed their world." The wind carried his words across the forest, into rivers, and toward the night sky. And the stars themselves seemed to glow brighter, as if answering his vow. Far beyond the green world, the stars were not silent anymore. Signals crossed the void, reports, whispers, and alarms, all carrying the same word, Earth. Across the galaxy, the mighty Zereth Empire watched the miracle planet through their cold machines. They saw deserts turn to forests, rivers born where dust once ruled. They saw humanity's ships hovering in peace, not war, and they did not understand it. In the great halls of the Imperial Senate, the High Lords gathered. Holograms of the reborn world shimmered before them, oceans forming, mountains alive with green. One lord slammed his fist. "This is a violation of the Neutral Systems Treaty." Earth has no right to alter planets outside its domain, another growled. But an older voice, calm and bitter, replied, They are humans. They never asked for permission. Messages were sent, cold and formal. To the Terran Council, the Empire demanded an explanation. They wanted to know why Earth had interfered, why their fleets had entered forbidden space. Their diplomats spoke of order, of rules, of balance. But the galaxy had already seen the images, a dead world reborn by human hands. And many wondered which power truly held the right to rule. On Earth's lunar command, the Terran Council gathered in quiet strength. The fleet commander stood before the assembly, her armor glinting with starlight. Transmit this response, she said, her voice calm, clear, unshaken. Tell the Empire that we came not for conquest, not for profit, but for gratitude. The council nodded, and the message was sent. Across the stars, the Empire received it. 12 words that shook the galaxy. They fed one of us, so we fed their world in return. The sentence spread faster than any war declaration ever had. It traveled through merchants, miners, scholars, and soldiers. Each race heard it and understood. Humans repaid kindness with creation and vengeance with silence. On the green planet below, life continued to bloom. The villagers didn't know about the politics among stars. They only saw the sky filled with ships that rained life, not death. They sang songs of the humans, calling them the garden makers. Their children played beside rivers that had no end. And the human who had once fallen among them smiled, knowing peace was never free, but it was earned. One evening, he received a transmission from orbit. A hologram of the fleet commander appeared before him. The Empire has issued a formal warning, she said, her tone steady. They may send scouts. He nodded. Let them come. Rema, standing beside him, asked, Will there be war again? He looked at her and shook his head. No, only truth. When the first Imperial probe entered orbit, humanity didn't hide. They opened communication, showing the green valleys, the forests, the rivers. The Imperial observers watched in silence as alien villagers harvested crops beside human engineers. No weapons, no fear, only cooperation. The probe sent everything back to its masters, and the Empire grew quiet. For the first time, the mighty rulers of the stars saw something stronger than power, compassion, and it frightened them. For how do you fight a species that rebuilds what others destroy? How do you threaten those who do not seek conquest, but creation? And how do you control those who act not for empire, but for honor? In the Galactic Forum, smaller civilizations began to speak. If humans can make deserts bloom, one leader said, perhaps they can help us too. The Empire tried to silence them, but the tide was turning. One world after another sent messages to Earth, not of fear, but of hope. Back on the green planet, the human stood at the heart of the valley. He watched the twin suns set behind the new mountains. The villagers were lighting lanterns made of glass, floating them over the river. He smiled, knowing each light was a prayer, not to gods, but to gratitude. He whispered to Rema, Your kindness changed the galaxy. She laughed softly. I only gave food to a stranger. He looked at her, his eyes bright. Yes, but that stranger carried humanity's heart. In the distance, thunder rolled softly, not of war, but of rain. And as the drops began to fall once more, the human raised his head to the storm and whispered, Let them send warnings, we will send gardens. And so Earth's message spread, not in fire, but in the bloom of every green world that followed. The Empire watched in silence as kindness became stronger than fear, and the stars themselves began to whisper a new truth, that humanity's greatest weapon was never its fleets, it was its heart. Years passed like the turning of gentle tides. The world once cursed by dust now glowed beneath twin suns, green and golden. Forests covered the old dunes. Rivers crossed valleys where skeletons of sand still slept. The air carried songs of birds that had no names, born from Earth's gift and the planet's rebirth. The human who had once fallen from the sky grew older, but never tired. He watched the villagers build cities of stone and crystal beside the rivers. Children of two worlds learned together, speaking words that mixed Earth's language with their own. And when they laughed, it sounded like the future itself. Rema became the elder of the new city, wise and kind. She called it New Illyria, meaning the world that remembered kindness. At its center stood a vast garden, filled with trees that bloomed in silver light. And beneath those trees rested the beacon, silent now, a monument to the moment hope began. Sometimes the human would sit beside it at night. He would trace the metal with his fingers and smile. "This little light called the stars," he would whisper, and they answered. The children would gather around him, asking to hear the story again. He would tell them of the crash, the hunger, and the bowl of water Rema had offered. He would tell them about the old desert that had learned to breathe again. And when the little ones asked, "Did the stars forgive us too?" he would smile. The stars never needed to forgive, they only needed to remember. Across the galaxy, stories of Illyria spread like dawn. Pilgrims came from distant systems to see the world humans had reborn. Some brought soil from their own dying planets, hoping Earth's people might heal them too. And slowly, one by one, humanity sent out more ships, not fleets of war, but fleets of renewal. Each ship carried seeds, engineers, and teachers. They landed on forgotten worlds, teaching others how to grow, how to live, how to care. Soon, hundreds of planets began to bloom with green light, and every new world carried a single engraving on its cornerstone. They gave food to one of us, so Earth gave life to all. On Illyria, time flowed gently. Rema grew frail, her steps slower, her voice softer. One evening, she sat beside the human in the garden of silver leaves. "The world no longer needs us," she said with a smile. He looked at her, eyes bright with quiet pride. "That means we did our work well." When she closed her eyes for the last time, the entire valley fell silent. Lanterns floated down the river, thousands of tiny suns drifting across the dark water. The human watched them, his heart heavy yet full. He whispered, "She fed a stranger, and the stars fed her world." Years later, when he too became part of the soil he helped heal, the villagers built a monument at the heart of the garden. It showed a human and an alien woman standing side by side, holding a bowl of fruit. Beneath it were carved words that shone even after centuries. "Kindness is the seed from which worlds are born." Generations passed, but the story never faded. Every child learned about the Starman, who came hungry and left behind paradise. Travelers from far systems came to walk the green paths and whisper his name. Some said his spirit still watched the rivers, carried on the scent of rain. Above Illyria, the sky was never dark again. Earth's guardians maintained a single station there, not to rule, but to remember. From orbit, one could see the forests forming the shape of a great symbol, a hand offering a fruit, glowing emerald under the suns. And so, the tale became legend. Empires rose and fell, but the garden never died. For the seed planted by kindness had taken root not just in soil, but in hearts. And wherever humans traveled, they carried a piece of Illyria within them. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, when war threatened to return, commanders would whisper the ancient phrase before drawing their blades. They fed a lost human, they would say. So Earth made their world bloom forever. And peace would follow like spring after storm. The stars watched in silence as one act of compassion rewrote the destiny of countless worlds. And in the endless quiet of space, where voices fade but legends live, humanity's name was remembered not for its power, but for its mercy. A mercy that turned deserts into gardens and fear into light. A mercy that made the universe bloom forever.